call the meeting to order. So first of all, I'd like to motion to approve the agenda as I'd sent out earlier.
I motion to approve the agenda.
All right, everybody for
Second.
approving the agenda, raise your hand or otherwise verbally assent. Aye.
Aye.
There appear to be no nays. That passes unanimously. Our next order of business is to approve the minutes from the September meeting.
I move we approve the minutes.
I second. Everyone who would like to approve the meeting minutes from the September meeting, please raise your hand or otherwise verbally assent. Aye.
Aye.
All right. There appear to be no nays, so that passes unanimously. The minutes for the September meeting are approved. All right. Looks like Carson's not quite here yet, so we'll cede the floor to him when he arrives. So Kristen, could we move to the treasurer's report?
Sure. This month we have the month of September, I should say. We ended with about $2,833 in revenue. Our expenses were $1,942. So we were actually in the black, $890 that month. So that puts us fiscal year to date, in the red, $815. So that should be made up in October. So far, this month we have received about $5,000 in revenue. So this is our largest month generally in the fiscal year, which is still is down from previous years, but it should put us in a better position. That is all I have. Yes.
Kristen, when you say this year, do you mean this fiscal year?
Yes. This fiscal year.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions for me?
Here come Lori and Carson.
Wonderful. I don't think I have any other questions for you on the financials. I know we are trying to get in contact with a tax accountant to figure out what to do about filing the taxes, considering everything going on and not having all the records. Have we been able to locate an appropriate accountant?
Not yet. I think Carol has a meeting with someone today, maybe, or Monday. And I was kind of waiting. I was on my list for this week, but once I saw your message, I can reach out. Also, I don't have anybody I know personally, so I was just going to reach out by, the Yellow Pages, not really, but looking online and trying to find what some options might be. So if anyone else has anyone, I know Lori had possibly someone, or if you could send me even their contact info, I'm happy to reach out to just to explain a bit what we need and see what that might look like.
And I will update you all after my meeting today.
Thank you.
I can make one suggestion that might be a good thing. There's a firm in my area called Okemos Tax, run by Kim Midgley. She's done work with a lot of mental health practices, and so at least she's kind of aware of the industry that we're serving. But she's also very good about sitting down and discussing kind of what the situation is, and is good at giving kind of guidance with that. So she might be a good way to go.
Thank you. I think is that someone Rachel Bentley recommends often? I think she uses them too. Yeah. I had her kind of in my head to reach out to on my list, so I will do that.
Okay. Any other questions for Kristen on the financial reports? All right. So next, I'd like to turn things over to Carson Gatt from Acuitas. Some of the things he might be commenting on are things we'll be discussing later in the meeting. So if you're not aware, anyone watching the recording, what he's talking about, hopefully we'll be getting to that a little bit later. All right, so I turn things over to Carson.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I wanted to touch on kind of the outlook legislatively, high level to start, and then three specific kind of issues that we're currently exploring and looking into. So obviously we are less than 2 weeks away from the election. If you guys are all like me, I think we're ready for this to kind of be over and figure out, what the lay of the land is, get our normal TV commercials and ads, back to what they used to be. But so obviously that election first Tuesday in November. Following that, the House will meet on, I think it's November 7th. So that Thursday, 2 days after the election, and they will have their internal leadership elections. So, if the House stays in Democratic control, that will again be Speaker Tate, and we will probably see, similar positions through appropriations and other chairs later on. But we'll see a pretty consistent leadership outlook. But if Republicans take the House and flip the majority, it's kind of a little bit up in the air right now who the speaker would become. So that's something to keep an eye out for that following week. So I think it's the 12th through the 14th. There may be some legislative activity. I think it kind of depends on what happens with the outcome of the election, but there is a potential for some movement on stuff during those 3 days. And then that leads into November 15th, which starts the traditional legislative hunting break. So they take that off basically all the way through those 2 weeks that go up to Thanksgiving. And then after Thanksgiving, back in session for a frenzy of a December is kind of what we're expecting. So that's that's the general outlook. Again, anything that doesn't get passed and signed by, I think it's like December 31st by the governor, 2025 starts a new legislative session for both the House and the Senate. All new bills have to be reintroduced. There are a couple other things that I'll touch on with our LLPC legislation, but things that you can do in November and December, if for some reason, if you're prepping for reintroduction in 2025, there are steps that you can take in November and December to help expedite that process once the calendar flips.
Okay. And then as far as the LLPC legislation, I'm guessing you haven't heard too much back from legislators in the past month or so. But is there any reason why to think why we wouldn't be able to get that passed in lame duck?
If anything, it would just be a purely timing issue. The fact that now the department came out and kind of made a statement on it at the last Board of Council meeting, that was a newer development. To be honest, obviously they were always supportive and kind of on the outskirts of it and weren't necessarily involved. But if they're able to, apply pressure, or not necessarily apply pressure, but kind of be outspoken that, hey, we need to get this done, and it's a timing issue, that increases our chances. So that was a great development that we heard from last Friday's board meeting from Wes at the department.
And so is that something we can include in any communications to legislators, or that you can on our behalf, in terms of like Laura is behind getting this done and is asking for it to be completed before the rules are reviewed in January?
Yes, and that's something I'm going to work on with the department. Obviously don't want to speak for them. So if they were able to, have a letter or a statement or something that we can share, that'll be helpful.
Okay. And then I know I've been sending you a lot of things the past couple of weeks with developments and stuff. So I know we've also been talking about the Counseling Compact and the ways to begin to interface a little bit with Laura about that, since Laura is kind of unique in the country in terms of state agency. And so one of the things that I was wondering too is, does the model legislation that the compact provides and that you have to abide by, is that compatible with Laura?
I would say yes, just because I know that there have been like the site compact, and they've explored other compacts. I think the department would have to look at this specific language. It gets frustrating with the department to a certain extent, and it's not their fault by any stretch, but they tend to only give an analysis or a review on bills that are introduced. So they're very hesitant to give positions or kind of show their cards, I'd say, before there's an actual bill number. So we're going to set up a meeting. There's a gentleman in Laura who's kind of the lead on compacts. His name is Mac Jones. And I've spoken with him in the past a little bit, but I'm going to recircle and set up a meeting with him, and whomever from MMHCA can join on that call, and we'll kind of talk in generalities, I'd say, and look at some of the model legislation and all that stuff. But I have a feeling they're going to want to actually review and give a stance once something's been formally introduced.
Okay. Well, and I know that might be a chicken and egg scenario only if I know that legislators are going to look to Laura and basically go, is this legit or is this okay? Even to begin considering. So, maybe start looking for legislators who might be in support of it, even so that we can get the actual bill language written up and then looked over by Laura. I know we were also looking at some checking into the organizations around the Council Compact too, just to kind of make sure they're on the up and up, such as the Council of State Governments. I know we talked about that and looking into that. So whenever you have that information, feel free to send it over.
Yeah, CSG is they're pretty solid. It was actually on another call that I was on Monday. They're looking into a dental compact or a dental hygienist compact, something similar. And they're running into the issue of having two different groups pushing two different compacts kind of within the same industry. So, this actually caught my ear because they were saying the one that is backed by CSG is the one that they're moving forward with, and that the majority of people within the industry are supporting.
Okay.
So take that for what it's worth, but I thought that was interesting information for us.
Okay. Yeah, Carol?
Chris, I just wanted to let the board know that I did mention in public comment at the Board of Counseling last week that MMHCA's intention is to educate Michigan counselors about the compact. So just wanted to make sure everyone knew that.
And the Compact Commission, Counseling Compact Commission, met on October 8th. And they went over the rules that they're looking into, and working towards promulgating, and kind of went through the process of their commission meeting. And so I was on that. I know Carol was able to join, and so was Larry. And I thought there were a lot of good questions that people had, and I think the organization and the commission is organized and moving in the right direction. Again, there were 15 questions that Carol, Larry, Lori, and Chris and I kind of explored that we didn't have the answer to. So I think it's definitely in the information gathering stage. But that's important to walk through all that stuff and be able to ask those questions to people associated with the compact, because if we're all asking those questions, then counselors and MMHCA membership is going to ask you all those questions. So being prepared to answer those and to get the right information is the stage that we're at right now.
Okay. And I know that, one of the things that if we're putting together an educational document for counselors, we need to be very clear on the privilege fees and then compact fees and what that's going to mean. Just because each state's going to set its own privilege fee. And, that was one of the other things that I was kind of wondering and was hoping to learn from Laura is kind of what their idea for that would be for Michigan. Because I know there's frequently been times where Laura has not wanted to take on, another burden of work because, they're already doing a lot. And this would require them to do that. And so figuring out what they would be looking for privilege fees, I think is also a good thing to know.
Yeah, and I wonder too if I'm the department, I would say, we need a couple FTEs, which is full-time equivalents. It's like jobs that are appropriated through the state budget.
Yep.
And if I were them, I'd say, we need a couple FTEs and some administrative funds to be able to do this. So that's another piece of the puzzle is there's probably some money on the back end that needs to flow through the department, to execute this properly.
Larry?
Yeah, just real quickly, having attended that meeting with Carson and Carol, I got the sense that most states don't know those things yet in terms of fees because they don't have the software up that the states have to integrate with yet. So there's a lot of unknowns still, because the Compact Commission is just now putting together software that's going to link to everybody else.
Well, and the reason I asked that too is because depending upon what these privilege fees end up being, and from my understanding, they have to be paid every license cycle, right? Of the state that you have the privilege to practice in. So we actually have a longer cycle of license than most states. Some states are even just a year. And so some of these privilege fees are going to have to be paid annually, plus the compact fee. And so figuring out okay, what's the difference between having the privilege to practice and just getting the license at that point, and making sure that that's a substantive difference from where it is now. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is you might not know that until very late because they don't have anything set up yet.
Yeah. Any other questions for Carson on the compact? Where that's going? Okay. And then Carson, I had also sent you an issue of last week about the managed care organizations and the serious mental illness issue. Have we learned anything more on that?
So the update and is everyone familiar with that, or is that going to be something that's touched on later in the agenda?
I think I talked with folks about it. I've informed people about it earlier in the week, but I was also going to go over it again just so anyone watching is aware of.
Perfect. So we are in the process of reaching out to similar organizations to number one, see is anyone else experiencing something similar, and then number two to really kind of band together as a coalition and affiliated organizations and the stakeholders representing mental health here in Michigan, as well as meeting with to have a conversation with Meridian on the issue to bring this up to them and to be able to have a conversation, and then also alerting the department and DHHS and trying to figure out, why are we being told one thing and then when we go and do that, then you're told the exact opposite, and it's kind of the ring around the rosy point the finger game.
Well, and on top of that, the things that they've listed as serious mental illness are, everything ranging from, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorders, which I can understand being a serious mental illness that, that policy may affect, but also things all the way to adjustment disorders and generalized anxiety disorders. you know, it almost feels as though they just pulled the list of codes that are most commonly billed and said, oh, these are things we don't want to be responsible for anymore. Kristen?
I had a question really, and I don't know if Carson has already spoken with anyone at Meridian or if this is something we can talk about later, but I saw reference to this in communication. I haven't looked up if this is accurate, but people are getting their original denied claims for those reasons. Some of those diagnoses have been reprocessed and were in process of being paid. So it's been discussed that perhaps they modified that list and adjusted it, or they had made an error. Do we know anything about the truth to that?
Carson, do you have an answer to that? Because I do, but
I'll let you go ahead on that then, Chris.
okay. So they announced this originally on the 14th, this policy, and then on the 18th, so this past Friday, they were like, oh, we, you know, basically they kind of walked it back. And so they're trying to, basically what they're trying to do is they're like, okay, we're gonna go and talk and make sure that we're aligned with MDHHS to try to figure out additional guidance. So basically they got called out for it. And they're like, oh, we'll restore it immediately in the interim while these discussions are ongoing. So it remains a problem. It's just kind of more in a holding pattern. And this is where we want to also be able to reach out and try to have a voice in that. Larry?
Yeah, also, you know, I sent this to Chris yesterday that, you know, according to NIMH, National Institute of Mental Health, serious mental illness is not based on diagnosis. It can be any diagnosis. It's based on impairment, how much it impairs major functioning of a person's life. So they're choosing it by diagnosis is totally unfounded.
Well, and in addition, like, yeah, I mean, it's making a clinical claim about something that they've only seen, you know, what gets submitted with an insurance claim, which is diagnostic codes, the CPT code, date of service, rendering provider, and they're somehow making a clinical decision on that. And there's also some concerns I have in there, but I'll save that spicier stuff for when I'm talking with Carson. Laurie.
Yeah, one of the things I want to bring up with Larry is that there has been a lot of trainings where it's been taught to therapists that you base your treatment plan on the diagnosis. And there's no like subtleties of, no, we need to base a treatment plan on how much it impairs the functioning of the person and not on the diagnosis. We don't treat diagnoses. We treat people and we help them with their behaviors. And I'm not sure that's being made clear in some of the trainings either.
Kristen?
I was just going to say, I think that is the disconnect between insurance, the medical model, and, you know, what's clinical best practice. So I think that's across the board.
I have also been in contact with Michelle Zukowski-Serlin. I don't know how many of you are familiar with her, but she's been very active on this, and so I was going to talk with her hopefully today. Oh, looks like at noon. I'm going to talk with her at noon about the legislator she's been contacting and see what information she's gotten as well. So I'll pass on anything there I can. All right, any other questions on this or comments from you, Carson?
Nope, that's it on my end. Lots of outreach and hopefully quite a few meetings being scheduled over the next couple of weeks and with an election mixed in there. So we definitely have the high priority items that we're looking at and we're on top of it.
Wonderful. Kristen?
All right, just one more question for Carson before he leaves. Did you have any ideas about what legislators might support the compact? And back to Chris's point, if we had to kind of go that route before we could get feedback from Laura?
Yeah, so Representative Braybeck is always one that pops up. She is a social worker and I think we've talked about it before, but she's introduced several pieces of legislation related to kind of mental health as well as social workers. Actually, she's trying to change the exam requirements, I believe, for social workers. So she's taken a stand on that. So she'd be, the first person that we reached out to, as well as, the DHHS subcommittee chairs, health policy chairs as well, and kind of logically go through those legislators who are well known and educated on, kind of the focus area of what we're looking at.
And when we find out who those are, especially going into new leadership and such, would you give us a list of those folks, and we can see if we know of anyone either on the board or off the board that can contact them as a constituent?
Yes, exactly. And then it's even so yes to that, and then it's also finding out who your local representative is, and then reaching out saying, hey, this is a big deal. Can I show up to a coffee hour? Just to have 5 minutes of your time to talk about this, and then start to engage that relationship.
I'd written up a letter about the MCO serious mental illness issue that Larry and Carol helped me edit. If we want to generalize that out and see if anyone else wants to use that with their own legislators as well, or if we can get it into a state fit to even provide to membership so that they can reach out as well, so that we can make this more well known. Because I think we might get traction with some other folks in the legislature as well, because it's the company, Meridian, in some ways trying to pass the cost back to the state, and so anyone who is concerned about government spending may also not be happy with that, because it's a little bit of, it could be considered double dipping into the state's coffers.
Yep, most people frown upon that and are not favorable to organizations or companies that do that. So that's a really good point.
All right. Any other questions for Carson? Oh, Lori.
So Carson, this is kind of more of a take care of yourself. The next couple of weeks are going to be kind of crazy, hectic, but know that you have a lot of people behind you here that really appreciate your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you guys are awesome to work with, and appreciate everything as well. So the feeling is mutual.
And I know you said you were out of town today, attending to some personal or family business. So since I don't think we have any more questions, we will release you to that, and please enjoy it.
Well, thank you very much. And my last little thing is, Chris, I believe, are you receiving like the newsletter from Acuitas and other updates?
I don't think I'm.
Okay.
I don't think so. If you wanna put me on that, I can, because I think I get sometimes, but not very regularly.
Okay. We've been having an issue with MailChimp and email addresses, but especially as we get closer with the election and everything, I will make sure, I'll double check, see what we can do to make sure that gets fixed. But then I will also forward those even to Carol and Larry and Lori as well, or whoever, as we get really close here in the next 2 weeks, kind of election updates. I will make sure you all get those, and then kind of disperse from there as needed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carson.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye. All right. And then we did have one point of business on the agenda before we get into kind of the informational areas, which was Chair of Education and Outreach Committee. We've been having some discussions about the need for, some more help in reaching out to membership and kind of creating opportunities for education and trainings and such. And so we decided to recreate the Education Outreach Committee, or we will in a few minutes because we haven't motioned it. And in that, we reached out to Elizabeth Teklinski, who has been a really wonderful partner and someone who's helped us out a lot at different times during the organization's history. And so I was going to say that to open this up, do we have any questions or comments that we want to make before any motions are made? Or we can just switch to the motion and do discussion during that period. Doesn't look like
I
there's
would
any
vote for
comments.
I would vote for the motion and then the discussion.
Okay, well, I will make the motion and we'll see if we have a second. So I motion to create an education and outreach committee and to appoint Elizabeth Teklinski to the position of chairwoman of the committee.
I second the motion.
Will everyone voting for the motion, please raise your hand or otherwise make verbal assent.
Oh, discussion. Larry, are you saying discussion first?
Yeah, shouldn't we discuss it before
Yeah.
we vote on it?
We can call for discussion, absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't want to vote on the motion because then the motion's final.
Yes.
You want to discuss it first.
So is there any discussion that people would like to make about the creation of the committee and the appointment?
I
Carol?
will just say that I'm so excited that Elizabeth is interested in doing this and continuing her work with us. She was a member at large on the board for a handful of years, a handful of recent years, and so she's just got a good understanding of our mission and where we need to go, and she is an incredible resource that our members and I think all counselors in the state are going to really benefit from. So I'm really excited about this.
Could we also,
Larry?
before we vote on it, could either you, Chris, or Carol, or maybe Elizabeth talk about what the role what we see the role encompassing, so that we're not just voting on something that's kind of blind, so that people can get an idea what this means and what that might be about.
So it sounds like there's a question there.
Yes.
So what does this position look like and what is the purpose of it? Sounds like the question. Okay. So the purpose of this committee and the position itself would be for someone to be specifically working on the area of creating educational opportunities and resources for MMHCA membership, as well as outreach to, my imagination of it at least, is mostly to counselors, to inform them about the organization, to tell them about the things that we have going on, and in part to help increase membership numbers. The outreach is not so much to other organizations unless that's something we all decide on. But yeah, my thought was specifically it is about member education and outreach to members and prospective members. Kristen?
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question, but I was going to ask the same question Larry asked, and also just a follow-up. Does this include training opportunities? I'm just thinking of how Elizabeth has already been involved in the past, which we're really grateful for, kind of behind the scenes, and already has facilitated some of those workshops. And so I guess it is a question.
Yeah, and I guess that is exactly why we thought of her for that role, was because of her past and helping to put on those workshops in the past. She has a good working knowledge of that and what's needed to put on proper workshops behind the scenes. And so I think that was one of the big reasons why we were so excited to have her join. Larry?
Go clarification. So when we say education and outreach, the education isn't just educating members about MMHCA or potential members. You're also talking about training and competency of our members, in addition to just educating them about MMHCA.
Yes.
That's been my understanding.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Lori, notice you haven't said anything. I don't know if you have any words for it or if you're available.
Because she wrote she had to step away for just a second.
Oh, I didn't see the chat. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Okay. Um,
I'll just say one quick thing because I don't know if Liz is going to have a chance to talk about it. But one thing I'm excited about that Liz and I have been talking about is she's interested in doing a monthly 1 hour peer consultation group like Kristen and Larry are doing, but hers would focus on Medicare questions because she is a Medicare expert.
and that's also one of the ways that we're looking for that education, because if I remember correctly, your book that you have coming out right now is about Medicare and billing it specifically with information relevant to Michigan as well, right?
Yes.
Correct.
It's called Medicare Post 2024, the mental health, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Mental Health Counselors Comprehensive Manual to Incident to Billing, Best Practices, Procedures, and Compliance Strategies for Licensed Counselors. Thank you.
We won't ask you to talk anymore with your voice. So yeah, I mean that, and I think that's something that most counselors, they're kind of, if they know about it, they're kind of going on kind of jigsawed together knowledge. So I'm actually really glad that we're going to have that resource, and maybe one of the first things that we can kind of do is get a workshop about that, because I'm assuming that there's a lot of people that are wondering about how to interact with the Medicare system, what it means, and how we interact with it as LPCs. Okay. So with that, is there any other discussion or questions that people have? Okay. So I will move us on to a vote. I'm going to call the vote for the motion to create an education and outreach committee and to appoint Elizabeth Teklinski to the position of chairwoman of the committee. If you are voting in the affirmative, please raise your hand or otherwise verbally assent. Okay. If you are going to vote no, please raise your hand or otherwise verbally dissent. And it looks like since Lori has still stepped away, that'll be an abstention. All right, the motion carries by unanimous vote of the present board members. We've created the Education and Outreach Committee and appointed Elizabeth Teklinski to the position of chairwoman of the committee. So cheers. So Larry, go ahead.
Boy, I'm so happy that Elizabeth's going to take on all this work to get it off the rest of us.
Well, and with your background in providing educational resources too, I'm assuming you're going to be working with her on some of those projects.
I'll help any way I can, Liz.
Kristen, do you have something you want to say?
Well, I was just going to add, I should have probably said this during discussion, but I was just thinking about this is an opportunity just for anyone that watches later, perhaps, that we would be looking for members to be part of this committee. So Elizabeth would not be doing all the work. I know Larry was joking, but being able to kind of lead some of that work. So I think this is a good step in our continued growth. And yeah.
And let me just add on to what you just said, Kristen, and that is that people want to help with the committee and the process, but also people who are knowledgeable in areas that may be good resources for programming. We could use all that help we could also.
And so that's a very good point. It is not helpful if all we have are chair people, right? the lifeblood of any organization is the volunteer efforts of members and people in this community. And, you know, we might want to start calling for members for some of these committees as well. You know, because there's a lot of work to be done. And so, you know, maybe over social media or interfacing with people that you might know, reach out to people who would be interested. And that way, you know, it's not all on us, but it's also that members can be involved. They can have some agency in the direction of the organization. Because yeah, we need it. We're not all knowing. You know, I don't think anyone here would claim omniscience. And so, you know, if you have an area of expertise, you know, for those watching later, please contact us if you're interested in helping.
And Chris, you know, one of my group yesterday, the one for supervisors, it came up, there's a person there who's really enjoys and is very knowledgeable about a very niche thing in supervision, and who said she might be willing to do a workshop. So those types of things come up, and it's nice to have a place that we can sort of centralize it.
Absolutely. Carol?
Just a little note about what you were just talking about, Chris. When we send emails to members, they can just hit reply, and then it goes to our board email account. And I just wanted members to know that even though sometimes we might not be super quick about getting back to you, your emails matter, and we're excited to get them. And thank you for your support and your encouragement. And we're really grateful for this community. Thank you.
All right. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to be moving us forward on the agenda. In terms of the Council Compact, we covered a lot of that information while Carson was here. We're actively engaging with, you know, the state and Laura and legislators to find a way forward, as well as to make sure that it's going to work for Michigan and be in the interests of counselors and clients in the state. If you have comments or and by the way, for those watching later, if you have expertise or understanding of things related to the compact, feel free to send us that information too. Again, you may have more expertise in some of these things than we do, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the Counseling Compact? Liz?
I would like to put together an infographic of like the historical aspects, you know, nationally with the compact, where we stand today in the state of Michigan, and next steps, and pros, cons, lists, charts, statistics, whatever. So I would really appreciate anybody's input to that, and let me know what you think about that idea. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and you know, it lets people know more information, hard information, hopefully, about the Counseling Compact, what it's going to mean, and you know, what we're doing towards it. You know, I know that there's a lot of people on social media who are like, why aren't we following this? And we are following it, but we're making sure that it's also going to be good for us. And I think those infographics would be a great way of showing that and communicating some of that information. Any other comments or questions about Compact? Carol?
Chris, I just wanted to let members know that it is fully our intention to hold a couple town hall meetings and different things like that. We really, really want people to be informed about it, so they can make informed decisions about it.
And so one thing we might want to do is when we if we send out an email or a Facebook post about this meeting, taking some of the things that we're saying to members and putting them in text, they don't have to watch us all the way through to this point in the meeting. I don't know how many people do that. So maybe take a list of all these things that we're talking about and put them in text so that they're more easily accessible too. But yeah, town halls, I think, would be a great plan to let people know more. Any other questions, comments about compact related business? All right. So the counseling conference, this is exciting. So we had the program director of Western reach out to us because it looks like with the absence of any counseling conference in the past several years in the state of Michigan, the schools counseling programs have gotten together and have decided to do their own. And these are the counseling departments from Western, Eastern, Central, and there was another one that I keep forgetting.
Oakland.
Who have come together to put on a conference that's going to be happening April 11th, I believe, at EMU. Does anyone have the theme of that conference? I'm gonna
Building
pull it up real
bridges and breaking barriers. A path to statewide counselor engagement.
And they reached out to us to see if we would be interested in being involved. And I told them that we would love to be involved. And we've already had a meeting with two of the organizers there, where we've talked about doing a program on the compact, I believe it was, and then also offered potentially some other options. As a note for anyone who is looking to present at this conference, the deadline for that is October 31st. Oh, no, that is wrong. I am wrong on that. Proposals are being accepted from October 1st to November 30th. So you have some time to come up with your proposal. I think we've put the flyer in Facebook, and so in there's a list, there's a connection to their website, and on their website is the form for proposals for speaking. It was October 31st if you want to being a reviewer for proposals. So if you want to be a reviewer for proposal, that date is October 31st. I was like, where did I get that? And it looks like they're offering up to 5 clock hours of CE credits as well for folks. We'll also be seeking to give a scholarship for students who want to go to the conference and who aren't able to. And that's something we've been in discussion with them about as well. But yeah, Friday, April 11th, 2025, 8:30 to 5 p.m. at Eastern Michigan University. Any questions or comments that we have about that? Carol?
Chris, we'll be emailing the video of this meeting out this weekend, and I'll put a copy of the flyer in with the email.
Great. All right. Lori, welcome back. While you were gone, we did propose, discuss, and pass a motion to create an education and outreach committee and to appoint Elizabeth as the chairwoman. We set you as an abstention because you weren't able to be there.
Yeah, sorry about that. Family stuff coming up.
Life happens, right? If any
Right.
board in the world should understand that, it's a counseling board.
Well, thank you very much.
If there's no more discussion on the counseling conference, we can go to the last piece of the agenda. Okay. So the managed care organization and serious mental illness issue, people may be able to infer from some of the discussion with Carson, but one of the MCOs, Meridian, put out guidance that they would no longer be paying for behavioral health services that they considered severe mental illness based on a policy from MDHHS from 2022. They apparently looked back at that policy and decided that what would be considered as serious mental illness was something they could kind of set by themselves, and it included many diagnoses that are some of the most common diagnoses that we see. You know, adjustment disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, any form of major depressive disorder, as well as several that, you know, may qualify in many circumstances. Obviously not all, because we're basing that on the seriousness of the mental illness on the impairment and not the diagnosis. So, you know, some of those other ones were schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and bipolar disorder. And, you know, if those are managed well or inactive, they're not necessarily appropriate for a serious mental illness diagnosis, like designation. So they announced that policy change last week. I think it was Tuesday. And by Friday, they had said, oh, they put out another guidance saying, oh, we're going to work with our partners at MDHHS to figure out, what is considered, under this policy. Because the issue is that they were telling practices and providers to, well, you can't bill us, so bill the state directly. And then when people tried to bill the state directly, the state's like, I don't know what you're talking about. This should be something that's going to the managed care organization. Go ahead, Larry.
Chris,
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, but from the things that you sent me, that what they were also doing was they were saying people should be billing their inpatient services. Well, if a person's seeing a counselor, that's not inpatient. So I'm assuming that's where the confusion was at the state level. Well, wait a minute, these people aren't inpatient. Why are you saying it should be billed as inpatient? Which goes to the severity issue.
Yeah, and the PIHP, if I remember correctly, is a specific program, so it's not necessarily inpatient. The policy document that they did send out from 2022 did indicate that for severe mental illness cases that they were to bill the prepaid inpatient hospital program. I believe it was, rather than straight Medicaid, which the acronym is PIHP. So that is what the policy had said, but it did not state what was considered severe, or did not match what the list that Meridian tried to provide was. And one of the things that we saw is once Meridian started to do it, other MCOs started to do it. And so that's kind of the danger with the domino effect of that, is because that's going to leave, potentially tens of thousands of clients in the lurch, because how can counselors, social workers, and psychologists continue to see these clients if they have no path to reimbursement? Go ahead, Carol.
Chris, I think I'm just understanding something you were talking about earlier in the week. Are you concerned that these companies, especially Meridian, would do clawbacks back to 2022 when that document was issued?
Yes, that is one of my specific concerns, because they can say, well, we were overpaying this entire past 2 years, and so give us all the money back for that. And that could be catastrophic for lots of providers, and so it also further disincentivizes providers from accepting Medicaid at all. Because why am I going to deal with these hurdles? Why am I going to deal with this uncertainty for what is a substandard amount of reimbursement in general anyway? Go ahead, Carol.
Just a little mention here of that. This is yet again another good reason that we are working on limiting the number of years that clawbacks can happen in this state. And I also wonder if that's going to require, is Medicaid a different situation than the commercial payers as far as legislation in that area?
So we'd have to get clarification on that specifically, on whether it would require different legislation or a different section of legislation. That really just depends on how the laws are written. Now there was one other thing. There was a sample letter that I'd found from some folks working in California towards really, pushing against the power of the insurance companies. And I don't know how successful they're going to be, but I think it would be good for us to kind of learn from what they're doing and follow along with that. They're trying to make it so that there are no clawbacks. None. It's just not allowed anymore. Which, obviously would be amazing. And, California is often the standard bearer for those things. But, I would hope that we can also work to, Michigan has also started to kind of stand out under the most recent Congress in really like moving forward on things before it just becomes popular, right? And so I'm hoping that we can help Michigan also become another one of those peoples that's pushing for new things and new standards. Lori?
Yeah, Chris, I remember you sharing a list of the different states and the different clawback restrictions that they have. And I know we had talked about with Carson a bit about keeping it around 2 years. And I think on average, they were looking at 2 years, but there are some states and places that are, you only have 6 months back. And I
Yeah.
think we should probably shoot for that amount of time if we have to shoot for any. And no, I like the idea of no, there's no clawbacks. That's just end of the discussion. But if we're going to be pushing anything through legislation, I say we back off on the 2 year, which we were discussing, and just go 6 months or less.
Well, and so we had wanted to start out talking to them about like we wanted to start at 6 months, and 2 years was kind of like the maximum that we were going to be comfortable with. I think was, and so we were going to start lower than that even. So yeah, I mean but yeah, we can work towards that. Larry?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be practical. I'll try to be practical. I understand giving insurance companies a little bit of leeway because, within a month or two, there are mistakes that are made. And, we can correct those. But you're right, years doesn't make any sense. I agree with Lori, give people 6 months because then, yeah, there are mistakes that are made sometimes. Things sneak through and you got to correct those. But to come back to someone years later and say, oops, we made a mistake.
Well, and one of the things the California group was pushing for too was articulable standards for documentation and what is required, and that it be standardized across the state. Because you mentioned mistakes happen, and you can have some clawbacks, and I think having to have them prove those things rather than them to be able to just take them out of your future reimbursement or straight out of your account, that they have to make a case that, yeah, this is what happened. This is the mistake that was made. Right. And on top of that, depending upon where you're talking about, which company you're talking about, they'll say you have to have your notes in 72 hours, but we have to give them how long to figure out their shit? Sorry.
I think it should be made clear to the membership that right now in Michigan, they have unlimited times. They can go back, for years. And if you're in any position of looking at your future and your practice and or retirement, to plan for something from 10, 15, 20 years ago could possibly be yanked from you personally, it's not realistic. But yet in Michigan, that is the practice now. They can go back as far as they want. And I don't know how many members are aware of that.
And so this might be more things for our education and outreach committee. But I think, and also, but I just wanted to kind of make everyone aware, and I think we're kind of getting a little bit out of that discussion about the original issue. But this is all stuff that I'm hoping that we can continue to tackle going into 2025 and really start to make some active pushes on some of these things. But for that, we will need membership. We'll need membership to help us deliver letters to legislators, and to push these things. Because all of our power comes from the membership. Without that, we're just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people in a Zoom call. So with that, I know we're about out of time. I've had us run a little bit late. I apologize. Do we have a motion to adjourn, or is there anything that anyone would like to say before we do?
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand or otherwise verbally assent. Appears that we have unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned.